Hello and welcome. Class number 4 for Awakening Breath series, where we have been following the 16 exercises of Anapanasati. We have been going through the first 3 tetrads so far, Kayana Anupasana, or mindfulness of breath in the body, Vedana Anupasana, or tracking, following mindfulness of breath and feel tone, Chitta Anupasana, we did last week, which was looking at the following or tracking breath with respect to the mind. And then this week we're working with Dhammaanupassana, working with the Dhammas, tracking the Dhammas. So let's go to the screen share here. Okay, so pay no attention to that class 4 of 6. I didn't make a new title card. So here we are, Awakening Breath. So class 5, the 4th tetrad, exercises 13 through 16 of impermanence, fading, cessation, and relinquishment. So this kind of wraps it up. This wraps up in terms of the exercises. Now then, because we're following along with the Anapanasati Sutta, the sutta continues on, but this is the meat of it. So thus far, in working with the body, Kayana Anupasana, we've been working with long breath, short breath, breathing the whole body, calming the bodily fabrications. In the feel tone, stoking the sense of piti, that energy, then the sukha, or the happiness. How can we derive that contentment or the joyful quality from that energy? Tone it down. And then, so having this vessel become more of a, how should we say, safe, abiding vessel for our attention that's less distracted by concepts, ideas, then we can consciously turn our attention towards the mental formations, becoming sensitive to the mental formations. And the way that I've been describing it is looking at the rise and fall of the see, hear, feel experience. Sensitive to the mental formations and then calming the mental formations. Yeah, so looking at the sensory impressions that rise and fall, and also how they are have in many of their roots a deep volitions, deep volitional impressions that come up that might goad us to become, so to speak. Yeah. So already here we're working, even though we're in feeling tone, we're working with the mind. So when we go into Chitta Anupasana, and we've kind of pulled the curtain away from all of our thoughts and feelings, and we're kind of pulled that curtain away from the content of thought to be able to have more of the direct experience of just awareness, the faculty of awareness itself. We experience mind. Then how is it that we can breathe in a way where we can either gladden or balance the mind, or gladden or steady the mind? And so in a way that kind of works with back to the Piti Sukha, how is it that we can breathe in a way that we can bring this sense of joyful energy? And then how is it that we can breathe in a way that we can kind of settle that down, and how that can stabilize the body? We're doing that same exercise, but rather than paying attention to the body, paying attention to the our quality, the faculty of awareness there. So gladdening and steadying and gladdening and balancing out the mind, and thus being able to abide in that, a liberated mind, a mind that is devoid of the hindrances, pulling it this way and that, devoid of the mental formations, the effluence that was recently used. It's devoid of our patterns that give rise to a sense of I am, that give rise to a discrete ego state that's wrapped up within, oh, what is it that you get caught in? What do you get triggered in? Okay, I'm meditating along, but then I've got this idea that now I have to start planning. Boom, that's an effluent. That's a particular deep pattern somebody might have. They're very much a planner. Some people might be more fantasy, some people might be more daydream. But each of these, there's this volitional force to go into and engage in such a way that we're reifying a sense of self within this narrative. So we're trying to work from that. We're trying to move away from experiencing self as this ego-based system, a player within a story, within amidst all of these concepts, to really just dropping down into the sensory system and just having this experience of self as a sensory system, just noticing how the nervous system is just kind of zeros and ones, turning on, turning off, turning on, turning off, and how these different elements of mind and body turn on, turn off, that might give rise to certain experiences. So this is what we're working with today, the Dhammas, or Dhammaanupassana. The Dhammas, sometimes translated as uh, 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 the mental faculties. Yeah, so some of these elements of mind. I like to talk about sometimes the chef being able to taste the soup and be able to discern what the ingredients are. We as deeply trained meditators being able to taste the experience of the mind and be able to notice what the ingredients are that are there. Uh, Old school, early Buddhism, it was either the five hindrances or the seven factors of awakening. We got the bad guys there that are kind of pulling us back versus the awakening factors that are moving us towards waking up. But as time went on, and you know, very much a lot of like the Abhidhamma schools were developing, they were just parsing out so many more different elements of mental factors, different discrete states of mind or elements that give sense to perception, volition, experiencing mind. So I like how the Dhammas work because this is more of, how shall we say, a directive, how to work with them. Doesn't matter what's coming up in your mind, but can we work with it in this way? Impermanence, fading, cessation, and relinquishment. Those are the themes that we're working with. So, moving into the first one there, one trains oneself. I will breathe in, focusing on impermanence. I will breathe out, focusing on impermanence. So I like to say sometimes when we have a word in the early suttas, it's just a word, it just means itself. But then sometimes we click on the word and it's a drop down menu of a deeper teaching. And so again, there's this term matikas, which has the same root as mother. It's like a mother teaching. It gives birth to these other teachings. So yes, we can focus on impermanence, but traditionally, impermanence is kind of the heading for, how shall we say, the teaching of the three characteristics. Yeah, the three characteristics. These are characteristics of anything. Anything that arises in consciousness, anything that arises within awareness is subject to dukkha, anicca, anatta, or subject to, there's some sense of dissatisfaction that's exerting a pressure on you. Yeah. It's subject to impermanence. It can come into being, it can pass away from being. And ultimately, it's subject to not self. We can see how we might identify with it in one moment, but in the next moment, it's really truly not the locus of our identity. Is it truly, in essence, ourself? Yeah? Okay, this might sound like three very random qualities. How are they strung together? Um, but this is a way that we can work with them. I like to think of them somehow as a sense of a directive. When before I started recording, we're having this conversation about, you know, struggling with bringing equanimity to whatever it is we observe. So I think that was very fitting in terms of looking at what we're doing tonight. So the quality of whatever it is that comes up that we notice, be it a breath, be it a sensation, be it a pain, be it a thought, can our awareness make contact, phassa, contact, not in a way where we're knocking against it, pushing it away, the sense of aversion, or that we're clinging, grasping to it, but how can we have this kind way of observing it so that we can kind of penetrate into that sensation? I use the metaphor of like water soaking into sand or the tea bag steeping in hot water. There's this kind, friendly non-opposition in the flavor of how we're noticing and making contact, so that we can sink into that sensation and begin to observe. And we can observe, well, how we might subtly be fixating, how we might be subtly grasping with a sense of craving or aversion, what have you. But in the sense of bringing this equanimity, this kindness, this softening to it, we can notice that maybe that sensation was, you know, in the sense of flow, coming into being and passing away from being. And maybe subtly it kind of, we fixate around it. The way that we can contact the sensation, we can maybe equanimize some of the craving aversion so that sensation then is released and it yields back to um, impermanence, and it yields back to the effortless flow of nature. So, contact a sensation, be it a sensation of feeling, a sensation of seeing in the mind, of hearing in the mind, Can we notice the potential dukkha that's there? Yeah, in the way that we're contacting it, can we notice? Okay, maybe there's some a little bit of aversion. Maybe I don't like it. Maybe there's a subtle way that I'm trying to push it away. That's reifying it, and then reifying a sense of me in struggle or in conflict with it. Maybe there's this sense of the sensation coming up, and maybe there's this want to have it, to cling to it. There's this craving for it. So we might be kind of not allowing it to go back to the effortless flow because of the way that we're just gripping onto it. So, can we notice the dukkha? Can we notice the sense of maybe there's some, just generally it's unpleasant? Generally, there's a degree of craving or aversion, restlessness or doubt. So, in contacting the dukkha and bringing that sense of equanimity, that sense of kindness, that sense of well being, softness to it, then maybe we can unfreeze it and allow it to return back to its original nature, which is impermanence. As we're contemplating the breath, it's something that's readily always available to us, but if we pay attention to it, it's always moving. So part of what we're looking at earlier is meditating on this cycle of breath, the in breath, the top of the in breath, the out breath, the base of the out breath, noticing the inherent impermanence, and it's always in motion, and it's generating certain qualities that are always different. This constantly entering into the newness of this present moment that's unfolding as the previous moment is collapsing away. So we can notice this, get a taste of this as whatever it is we're observing has some rate of change, some kind of movement to it. So we can contact the dukkha with sufficient equanimity. We can allow that sensation to go back to a sense of flow or movement. And usually that results in a diminished grasping and an increased objectivity. Yeah? So I have this pain that's happening in my stomach right now, and I'm feeling it, and I'm subtly averse to it. And I'm feeling a little bit of anxiety because what is that? Is there some sort of, I'm thinking about somebody who's recently talked about an operation that they had uh, um, on their colon, and here I go off into a story. And so this sense of I am is worry, is anxiety, is what have you. But if I can just kind of, again, let go of the dukkha that's in the seeing, the dukkha that's in the hearing, the dukkha that's in the feeling, just be with my primary contact of the sensation, I could notice that maybe it begins to soften and move somewhat. And that all that identification of this ego structure of me being anxious uh, begins to fall away. I'm no longer identifying with it. This gestures, I'm taking the mask off, so to speak. And so that petite ego state of suffering in that way begins to fall away. I'm no longer identified. Yeah? So that's the idea. One of the reasons that I like this, because this impermanence, even though it's the first exercise, it's kind of the roadmap of this entire tetrad that we're working with. So by discerning the three characteristics within meditation, one can achieve beneficial effects, or it has beneficial effects for our meditation. It can prevent the arising of ignorance / triggering deeper sankhara activation. So here's this pain. I have this subtle aversion, and now I'm going unconscious. I'm going unconscious and I'm falling into my fantasy. So that's the ignorance. I'm going to sleep to my experience, and I'm falling into my fantasy, and I'm kind of losing contact with what's real in the moment. So by being aware of, by practicing this way, we're staying awake. We're staying awake, and we're having this sensory clarity to know what's taking place. We're cultivating our concentration, cultivating sufficient equanimity. And thus it doesn't trigger sankharic activation, or doesn't trigger a reaction or a defense mechanism, so to speak. It can intervene upon arisen upward origination towards self. What does that mean? Word salad, that talks about really dependent origination, the way in which moment by moment we form a sense of I am. And so there's this contact, unpleasant, there's this craving, and then boom, I'm reaching, grasping for some habit pattern of worry. And then boom, that gives birth to a sense of I am. Now I'm caught in this mood state. So that's the upward origination of self, how I'm becoming me in this moment. Yeah? So it intervenes upon that. It's like, nope, contact, unpleasant. I don't need to go any further. I can just be with the unpleasantness. Yeah. This intervention results in the dropping to the antecedent link. Again, this is dependent origination speech. So I'm moving upwards towards, oh, here I go, onto like an anxious reaction. Oh, I notice I'm doing it. Oh, that thought is passing away. The image is fading away. That anxiety is fading away. I'm dropping down to here I am, just hanging out with the unpleasant sensation. Yeah. Okay. So we can practice discerning the flavor of flow as an object of focus. So in this impermanence focus, how is it that we can just be aware of flow? So I like how Dhammaanupassana is sequenced. It gives a very universally applicable way to relate to any phenomena that arises. Whatever arises eventually flourishes, passes. So how is it that we can just stand back and observe, not push or pull on that experience? Flow, rate of change. So any type of flow, there's a rate of change. If a sensation wants to grow larger, allow it. If it wants to contract and grow smaller, allow it. If it wants to disappear, allow it. If something else wants to come onto the scene, allow it. Maybe some rates of change are very slow, in which case it's a persistent sensation. But maybe if we can really kind of auger into that sensation, we can notice very subtly there might be a pulsation to it, or a vibrance to it, a scintillation. There might be very, very subtle fluidity and flow taking place. So we can just begin to sensitize ourselves to the theme of fluidity and flow, any rate of change. Yeah? Observe the rise and fall inside and out. That's a quote from Satipatthana Sutta, where Buddha is talking about this is what we're doing. We're observing the rise and fall inside and out, the coming into being, the passing away from being of our experience. So in the body, if there's a sensation, let's check out the size, the location. Is it local? Is it global? Does it want to increase, decrease in intensity? These are all ways that we can connect with some rate of change or flow or impermanence. So here we have this bell curve. I don't think I can do a series without referring to this. So this represents kind of time, a sensation. It's active, it's coming into being, yeah, and then now after its peak, it's fading away, and then at a certain point, cessation, it's gone, and then there's a sense of rest that may follow, or another sensation might come, or that other sensation, that first sensation may return again. But if we can just follow one arc of that sensation coming in and passing away, um, that's pretty much what we're looking at. This is pretty much how we are connecting um, to this mode of practice. So we're really increasing our sensory clarity so we can just be curious about the sensory system, and each sensation that arises passes. And let's notice, here it comes, there it goes, it's gone. What happens in the wake of its passing? So that leads us to the next exercise. One trains oneself. I will breathe in, focusing on dispassion, or literally fading. So going back towards that second half of that bell curve. One trains oneself. I will breathe out, focusing on dispassion. So dispassion, fading, impermanence beyond rising into passing. So the Manual of Buddhist Terms and Doctrines, Buddhist Publication Society, viraga is the term, disillusion or fading away. So viraga is the term for dispassion. So it means fading away, literally, detachment, absence of lust or sensual clinging, dispassionateness, it's an awkward word, appears frequently together with nirodha or cessation as a name for nibbana or awakening. So the fading away and cessation. So again, going back to that bell curve, comes into being, fades away, and then cessation. So that's part of what we're looking for in kind of the moment of awakening, or inclining ourselves to notice awakening. The more that we can notice the fading away and gone of sensation, it orients ourselves, it orients our attention towards a deeper cessation. Okay. So discerning the flavors of fading away, object of focus. So, cultivating a mind to see the fading away. Yeah, fading. We can use that as a label if you want. When you notice fading away within the impermanence, then label fading. Observe the rise and fall inside and out. The fading talks more about the fall, so to speak. Usually we notice the rise or the onset of stimulus. So, meaning normally we notice the rise, if we're not diagnosed with ADD, we're all kind of ADD by nature. There's a sense of, oh, what's that? Oh, what's that? Oh, what's that? We notice the things as they come onto the scene. But do we have the patience and the discernment to still pay attention to them as they grow quieter, 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 as something else is coming on the scene that wants your attention? Can we still stay with this thing to notice how it passes away? This is subtle work. This is very subtle work, noticing the passing away. So active versus rest and observing mental sankharas. I believe this is what we were doing the other day when we were working with Chitta Anapanasati. No, we're working, calming the mental formations. So that would have been exercise number 8 in Vedana Anupasana. So noticing the passing away. That's what we were doing. So we've been in calming the bodily and mental formations. This is what we've been looking at in the calming exercises. Yeah? So we're looking at the fading away and gone. Now we're just being very explicit about it. So anytime non-grasping is at work, it's facilitating this fading away. Okay. So then the next one trains oneself, I'll breathe in, focusing on cessation. One trains oneself, I'll breathe out, focusing on cessation. So cessation, nirodha. So it was briefly mentioned. Cessation is the momentary destruction of phenomena. Yeah. So it's just like we're hearing our internal talk. Oh, we notice that there's internal talk and then it goes quiet. It's a moment of cessation. Yeah. There's some internal imaging that's going on. Then there's a sense of, oh, I'm waking up. Here I am. I'm just fantasizing. And then we notice those images just kind of fade away and then gone. And now I'm just looking at the backs of my eyelids. Yeah, that's cessation. Yeah. I'm noticing, I'm following my breath all the way to the end. Then I start inhaling again. It's a moment of cessation. We can incline ourselves to notice these small little gones. That's orienting ourselves towards deeper cessation of like the deep grasping, the deep clinging to I am, the deep grasping and clinging to the sense of I am that's organized around dukkha or suffering. Yeah? That's what begins to gain momentum. So cessation, the momentary destruction, or the ultimate fading away, nibbana. Yeah. So gone in action, pointing towards emptiness. It's a point of contrast. Yeah. So what happens when we're following an object of focus and then it's gone? What remains in the wake of that cessation passing? That's just an interesting thing that we can look at, that point of contrast there. So practice discernment of the flavor of gone, of the object of focus. So there's the moment of passing from being to non-being. Again, can be anything. Start with cessation in the breath. That's an easy thing that we can connect with, sensitize ourselves to. Then we can begin to notice the cessation of the mental formations, the cessation of these different things that occur. They all at some point go. So gone and see, hear, feel, singular, collectively. Yeah, there can be this collective sense of all these aggregates that make up the sense of I am can potentially go as well. Now then, that kind of goes a little bit beyond of what we're hoping to do in this 6-week course. But just notice, this is kind of the deep Vipassana work, in particular in Dhammaanupassana. We're looking at the deep ways in which we can have this kind of gone of self and just kind of abiding in emptiness, so to speak. More on that.
Mike, excuse me, Michael, I had a question.
Yeah. Is that Kim?
Yeah, that's Kim. Just back to that, it was kind of one of those ahas, just so I understood. So how we were practicing, like, the pauses at the bottom of the breath and at the top of the inhale, you're saying basically what we could use that as a vehicle to explore, how did you say, you said the flavor of gone?
Yes.
So could you because that resonated with me, but I just kind of wanted to get a little more like handle on that. So you're saying as we come to that place of pause at the, let's say, the bottom of the exhale, and we kind of rest in that, that can be a kind of a jumping off point or a practice in impermanence, or
A practice in sensitizing ourselves to cultivating the palate to notice gone.
okay.
And so, with that bell curve, sensation comes into being, passes away from being, gone, rest. So yeah, if we do follow the breath, so the in breath, here comes the in breath, and the in breath is starting to fade. It's kind of no longer breathing in, and then there's that moment where I'm no longer breathing in anymore at the top of the in breath. But that momentum of breathing in is now gone, and there can be this kind of resting into the goneness of breath as in that momentary pause at the top of the in-breath before the next sensation comes into the being of breathing out. And then there's kind of a thrust initially, and then it begins to peter out, and then I naturally finish my exhale, and then there's that moment of gone. I'm just kind of resting in the base of the out breath. It's kind of no man's land before in-breath starts in again. So it's a way we can start to sensitize ourselves to a very tactile, tangible experience of gone. And then we
And then,
start noticing it very subtly.
okay.
So continue.
Okay, that's exactly right. That's kind of where I was headed, was so then the idea being that when we get that kind of that real felt sense, then we can translate that more into our actions, our behaviors in life.
Sure, we can translate that to actions, behaviors in life, but I would say the couple steps in between. Can we begin to notice gone within the other sensations in the body, gone within kind of the mental formations that happen? Can we notice that image associated with that fantasy, planning, daydream, move to gone? Can we notice that internal talk fading away to gone? Can we notice the emotions that are coming up fade to gone? Now, then the practicality that you just spotlighted is, yeah, our behavior in the world, our perception and behavior in the world. Um, I have a particular dynamic with the person. We get on the phone, all of a sudden we're arguing with each other. It's what we do. Now, then I can notice then in conversation, oh, that person said something, and here comes the button is being pressed. Here comes my frustration. And without going into anything else, can I just kind of be with that frustration? And there it goes, so completely to the point where, boom, my note is gone and I don't need to pick it up again. In that moment, there's a slight shifting of behavior. In that moment, there's a slight shifting of perception. We continue to do that over and over again. And a lot of these different habit patterns and behaviors around suffering, can begin to shift and change by noticing the relinquishing component that's just naturally available. But again, we're only inclined to notice the onset and not be aware of the way that we cling to the onset, so that we're just kind of always escalating our stress. Yeah? Does that kind of?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. It kind of makes it a little more I don't know, concrete, or yeah, just kind of which direction to take that in. So thank you for walking that through.
Cool. Thanks, Kim. Okay. And so this leads us to the fourth exercise here, or number 16 in the big list. One trains oneself while breathe in, focusing on relinquishment. One trains oneself while breathe out, focusing on relinquishment. Yeah, so relinquishment. Let's see, viraga nirodha. So the dispassion and cessation, that fading away and gone. It may mean the momentary destruction of phenomena or the ultimate fading away, nibbana. In the aforementioned two contemplations of viraga nirodha, fading away and cessation, it means the understanding of both and the path attained by such understanding. Yeah? So this is a just a fundamental way in which we can regard our experience of dukkha or discontent, rather than I'm feeling unpleasant, I don't like this, and then being part of the human experience, we seek refuge in our thinking, and we just escalate thoughts, which then trigger different defensive patterns and reactivities and volitional forces and effluence and all these habit patterns of discontent. Instead, all right, boom, here comes this particular quality of seeing, hearing, feeling internally. I'm seeing this image, I'm hearing this internal talk, I'm having this emotional reaction, and I'm being able to kind of track, okay, and then there this goes, and then this is going down, and then this is going down. By not fueling it, I'm allowing myself to notice the fading away cessation. And by not going to sleep, I choose not to pick it up again. Yeah? And of course, if it's a habit, it's going to kick back up on its own, but that's okay. We just try to be awake, allow, bring the sense of equanimity towards that experience, and turn our attention towards the fading away and cessation in that particular wave of sensory experience. Yeah? Just like in the breath, it just keeps coming. Oh, I spaced out on that breath. That's okay. There's another one coming. Yeah? We can turn that towards, oh, here comes a wave of sadness. I'm just being with this wave of sadness. Here's a wave of anxiety. I can be with that. And then I can be with the next one. Rather than, okay, here's a wave, and then here comes the next wave, and it's bigger, and here comes the next wave, it's bigger. It's like, all right, I'm just going to focus a little bit more so I can notice that natural response of all of our sensory experience. And then it begins to auger down really into all of these structures of all of these ego structures we may fall into that are um, deeply ingrained, deeply bound by our suffering. So, liberation, our suffering and the habit pattern around it, they're yoked together. So being liberated, that habit pattern is now decoupled from the suffering, so to speak. The habit pattern can go, the suffering can go. That is not to arise again. So this is what we're inclining ourselves towards in our sitting practice. So this is the uprooting of a vijja sankhara. If we go back to the discussion on the mental formations of vijja sankhara, the habit patterns. Yeah, is there a question?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, Jeff.
Quick question. Noting the steps toward relinquishment, you're noting them, you're not willing them or efforting them. Is that correct? They come of their own. They should manifest. Mm-hmm. You're not going, okay, now I need to go move on to blank in my process.
Yeah, ideally within a sitting practice, we're just allowing whatever comes up to come up. Generally, if you want to do what they refer to as a trigger practice, where you bring up something so that there's a certain degree of activation, one can do that. But then at a certain point, you have to stop feeding that story and then just turn the attention towards, all right, can I then kind of deconstruct this experience? So generally, yes, we're just noticing, allowing. We're not cultivating anything. We're not triggering ourselves. But from time to time, if you want to step up the obstacle course, sure, bring something up. But it's best, especially on the front end, to just allow it to come naturally. Because as we are cultivating the shamatha on the front end, there's less activation. So, we're kind of working with the smaller weights to make sure that we have proper form and that we're not injuring ourselves before we start kind of adding the plates to the bar and just doing like the heavy lifting. Does that seem relevant, Jeff?
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. So this is the way in which we go towards uprooting of vijja sankhara, the ignorance around the habit patterns or the volitional forces that are bound by dukkha. So what reminds, that's a typo, what remains in the wake of an object passing to nothing? So this is the unbinding. This is that moment, the arising of the emptiness there. Can we turn our attention to and just be aware of what is there? A sense of relief, neutrality, openness, fluidity. Yeah. So threading through the sense of cessation, relinquishing, nibbana, right view, and seeing through the sankharas, the effluence. So the right view, traditionally in Buddhism, for people that took the preceding course of Foundations of Buddhism, right view. So wrong view is the way that we see self and the world through the lens of an identification with our suffering. And right view is, having this sense of being able to see, oh, well, the Four Noble Truths or the Four Directives. Oh, okay, this is dukkha. I can see the origination of it. I can tend to that in a way where I'm realizing the cessation, and then path. But it's those first three that are really the directive of in the moment, contacting dukkha, knowing its origination, and then realizing the cessation. And they kind of fit like Legos with the three characteristics. So, first noble truth, no suffering or no dukkha. And the first characteristic, the impermanence of it, or well, dukkha, yeah. Know the dukkha. Be very, very familiar with dukkha. Know its origination, coupled with, well, yes, the impermanence of it. It no longer is moving towards how the suffering is being created, but by allowing it to pass away, that moves us towards knowing the truth of cessation. So dukkha, anicca, anatta, cessation, and we're breaking our identification with that suffering. So in a way, it's kind of the three characteristics in the Four Noble Truths are kind of like echo each other in that respect. So I realized that is a whole lot of theory as usual on the front end, but that's a whole lot of theory on the front end there. But let's get into a sit so we can actually kind of put this into practice. We can get a taste of it and then hopefully have a lively discussion on the back end. Yeah. Okay. So allow yourself to come to a comfortable upright position. Okay, so allowing yourself to straighten up and settle in. Settling into posture. Settling into simple contact with awareness itself. So we could either move linearly through all 16 exercises, or we can just apply this theme towards everything. There's this kind of interlocking fractal nature of the Anapanasati practice, which I find enjoyable. So even as we turn our attention now towards the simple contact with breath, contacting the part of the body actively engaged in breathing, be that the tip of the nose, lungs, or belly, just be with the breath. And automatically we can notice the impermanence of the breath. And so is in motion. We can notice that at the beginning of the inhale and the beginning of the exhale, there's a thrust, there's some volition in that. And then that thrust and volition begins to fade away. When we reach the top of the in-breath or the base of the out-breath, there's that moment of cessation and relinquishing before the next activity arises. And so opening up to this full body. The breath occurring, and there's also the different bodily formations occurring, the different sensations rising and falling. Some pleasant, some unpleasant, some neutral. So we're widening this peripheral awareness here. So as you're contacting the various sensations, can you note their rise and fall? You don't need to know everything all at once, just a facet of your experience at a time. Inclining yourself to notice the theme of impermanence of sensations in the body. As we can meet a sensation or two at a time. Just meeting it with this gentility, acceptance, and equanimity. Allow yourself to just be with that sensation. If it wants to move, expand, contract, shift in any way, shape, or form, just allow it. And some sensations are long and lingering, and some may be brief. Just incline yourselves to notice the theme of movement, impermanence, fluidity, flow. Our job is only to observe and allow. So this may increase our requirements of sensory clarity. And again, you don't have to be aware of everything all at once, just a facet of your experience at a time. And if in any moment it may begin to fade away, allow it. If it ceases, just be awake and aware of that moment of calm. At any point, if you want, you can just go back to simple contact with breath and we can cultivate the piti sukha. If you notice that your energy is flagging a bit, allow yourself to really become ingratiated into the yumminess of the breath. Anything pleasant about that, just give yourself permission to feel that pleasantness, creating this positive feedback loop. Here we're just stoking a little bit more energy. Serve for wakefulness, alertness, giving yourself that permission to enjoy, take comfort in, contentment. It's the sukha. It allows us to abide. Okay, good. So we're hanging out, just observing this happening in the body. And every once in a while, if you want to just stoke a little energy from the breath, you can allow yourself to do that. And we turn our attention to the mental formations, the internal seeing and hearing, as well as the emotions in the body. You can keep that involved too. So images that arise in that seeing space of the mind's eye. They come into being, they pass away from being. Internal talk heard in between the ears comes into being, passes away from being. So, just like we were noticing in the breath, noticing in the body, can we turn our attention to the internal seeing and hearing experience? As the sensations rise, can we notice their inherent impermanence, fading away, cessation, and rest? Those are those moments of gone and rest. We have these glimpses of just awareness itself. So we're observing, and then, well, we could come back to the breath. Just stoking some energy, noticing the pleasant qualities of breath, but noticing how that influences this experience of the mind, gladdening and balancing the mind. We can do that for a little bit. Again, I'm abbreviating the exercises and overlapping them, so I'm being flexible today. And to whatever degree we notice the mind bright, awake, alert, rested, without attaching to any thoughts, emotions, impulses, volitions, we can appreciate any flavor of a mind unencumbered, liberated. And yet still, activity happens. From moment to moment, there may be sensations that rise in seeing, hearing, or feeling. That's fine. Just allow whatever to come up to come up. You notice the impermanence and allow the impermanence. Just experiencing a sense of flow. And from time to time, whatever we're watching may begin to fade, in which case we could just label it as fading. And from moment to moment, that sensation may just pass away, gone. In which case we can label it as gone. Noticing our not picking it up again, we can appreciate the rest that is there. In which case we can label rest. So just hanging out in this open awareness, whatever we notice that rises internally. You can point out flow, fading, gone, or rest. So if you find those labels helpful, it might sound something like this. Flow, fading, flow, fading, gone, rest, flow, flow, fading, and so on like that. If it's helpful, use the labels. If it's not helpful, just be with your experience. And sometimes we notice ourselves grasping, falling into fantasy, planning, daydream. That's perfectly fine. That moment of waking up, notice the fading, gone, rest, of whatever it was that you were holding on to. Okay, at ease, everybody. I'm going to turn the recording off for the question and answer period. Okay, so thank you everybody for all of your excellent work, your patience, your taking in of this information, your applying it within the sit. So hopefully I'll see you all next week. We can end this formal sitting practice with a dedication of merit. By the merits of these acts and other such virtues, may we attain liberation for the benefit of all beings. We bow before those who have come before us on the path, after us, and to those who walk beside us on the path. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Have yourself an awesome week, and I'll see you all next time around.
Thank you. I enjoyed the class.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.